Welcome everyone to our May 2022 third Thursday Lunch and Learn. Please, if you would, take a moment and introduce yourself in the chat, who you are, your connection to Central, where you're located. It's wonderful to have each of you here. Our Lunch and Learns are open to faculty, staff, students, alumni, and the wider Central community. And so we have many people here joining us today, and I just want to give a special shout out to our most recent alumni class, the class of 2022 that graduated just a few days ago. And I see Musi here from that class joining us. We may have others from the class of 2022 that just graduated as well. So congratulations again to our most recent Central graduates. Our third Thursday Lunch and Learn program is a chance for the wide Central community to gather together and learn about scholarship and ministry, personal interests. It is a lunch and learn, so you are welcome to eat your lunch while we gather together today. And today we are excited to have with us Reverend Dr. Terry Rosell, who serves at Central Seminary as the professor of Pastoral Theology in Ethics and Ministry Praxis, and also serves as the Rosemary Flanigan Chair at the Center for Practical Bioethics. And Dr. Rosell will be presenting today and leading us today in our session on why medical ethics matters to you, a conversation with a bioethicist. So will you please join me in welcoming Dr. Rosell?
Thank you so much. Good to see the faces of some whom I've seen on Zoom sessions for Christian ethics in recent days. And I hope what I have to say isn't too repetitive of what we might have talked about in those courses. And for the others of you that I haven't seen for quite some time, maybe years, just lovely to see you. Thanks for beaming in. I'm going to share my slides. Are you seeing them now? Yes, very good. And how is my audio? Is that good as well? Thank you. All right. So my title is a little presumptive. Medical ethics, why it matters to you. It matters to me, but we might need to talk about what matters to you. And so that is my first question. What matters to you? And there are enough of us to have a good discussion, a few enough that we could have a discussion. So this is a real question. What matters to you? Anyone who's willing to volunteer something that matters to you.
I would say in some right conduct and right thinking in accordance with, the will of God.
So you are a very dutiful person, Craig. You're concerned about right conduct, about doing what is in keeping with the will of God. Thank you. And that may be something that others would have on their top 10, given the cohort that we're looking at today on the screen. But something else. Anyone else? What matters to you?
Family.
Family. I'm not surprised to hear that, although Jessica, I might have expected something more specific, like a particular family member.
All of them matter to me, but especially my daughter.
Yeah. And probably her father as well. Anyone else? What matters to you?
I would say human dignity matters.
Human dignity. All right. And we could talk about that and what that means. And in particular contexts, those of you who've studied ethics with me will know that I have repeated multiple times that context matters for the discipline of ethics. And human dignity, is concept that we would need to understand within particular contexts. But again, if we were to go down the entire list of those of you who are participating today, it might be the human dignity, along with family, along with right conduct, doing what is the will of God, that all of those things matter to you and would be on your top 10 list. What matters to us is our values. And we refer to that as good. What doesn't matter to us is a disvalue, and it might even be something we would label as bad. So a follow-up question is, what does not matter to you? You might even hope to avoid, but at least it doesn't matter to you that you attain it in life. Anyone?
Increasingly, the minutia of life that seems to polarize us, but in the scheme of things, won't matter 100 years from now.
Minutia of life that are temporary. You might reference the writer of the poem Ecclesiastes, who bemoans the fact that so much is minutia, vanity, meaninglessness. It all passes away. Anyone else? What doesn't matter to you? What do you disvalue, might even consider bad, you hope to avoid?
I know there's a lot of room for discussion here, but the first thing that came to my mind was money. That would be one of the last things on my list of what makes something important.
And that we would not assume is the case for everyone, would we?
No, oh no.
And for all of us, a certain amount of money is a value. If we have nothing at all of monetary resources, that's bad. It's just that, again, with the writer of Ecclesiastes, it looks like, Cheryl, you've learned that there are certainly a lot of things that matter a whole lot more than having money. And there's nothing like a health crisis to bring that into clarity, is there? Yeah. So anyone else? What do you disvalue?
I think I would put on there prestige and maybe accolades, the way people view you superficially.
So accolades, prestige, status, fame, perhaps, which for many people is high on the list of goods that they hope to attain in life, including people within the Christian community and the communities of which we are a part. Status, prestige is often something that pastors hope to attain. Academicians, scholars hope to write a book that everyone loves and that they get some acclaim for, if for no other reason, so as to help with promotion. But for others, it's just not on the list at all. In fact, there might be a disvalue. It might be a bad thing. There's a sibling group. They're from a Mennonite background. They're from a little town in, is it Ohio or Indiana? And they won one of these reality show talent contests last year, The Voice. And just the sweetest sibling group, two brothers and a younger sister, beautiful harmonies from it looks like, because I got interested in their music and I started reading about them, and looks like they come from a really holistic, faith-based, progressively so, Mennonite community and family. And now they're on tour, and they're getting fame and acclaim and prestige and money. And it just occurs to me, because it kind of reminded me of my own kids, just that kind of sweet approach to life. I worry that actually it will be bad for them. Now, I don't worry overly much. I don't lose sleep over it because they're not my kids, but and it's up to them. But too much of that can be a bad thing. On the other hand, if we have no status, if others disvalue us, that's a bad thing. So, Aristotle talked about the mean between extremes, and with some of our the things that we value or disvalue, really it's somewhere in the middle, isn't it? Some medium. So values and disvalues are on a spectrum. There are some things we value most, and some least, and some not at all. Does what matter to you, your values matter to me? Well, some of them, but not others. Does what matters to me matter to you? Well, some, but not others. One of the things that matters to me is artistic creativity. It gives me joy in life to create things like coffee mugs, and chalices, and music. That doesn't matter to all of you. Other things do. So we don't all agree on all of the things that matter and don't matter. We share some values, but not all. We don't value everything in the same way. We're even with family, that may be on the spectrum of value for some of you, further down than for others of us, for all kinds of reasons, because family has been toxic, because family is estranged for all sorts of reasons, because of mental illness that has caused havoc, including cultism around political figures and parties and ideologies. And so family becomes less value as a result of other things that have gotten in the way. And then perhaps friends or faith community, chosen spiritual sort of family, become more important than biological next of kin. We don't value everything in the same way. We're not all the same. We don't all agree on what matters. This is why ethics matters. Ethics is the discipline of thinking through. It's a rational process of thinking through the moral dimensions of human life together, individually and together. Since we don't all agree, but we do have to live together in societies, in neighborhoods, in church communities, faith communities, in seminaries, in workplaces, since we have to work together and we don't all value the same things in the same way. We need a disciplined process whereby we work out our differences. Ethics matters. How do you attain what's good and avoid what's bad? How do you get what matters to you and sustain that? And whether it's family or a disciplined a life relative to the will of God, or human dignity. How do you avoid things that don't matter, the miscellaneous minutia of life, or status that maybe is a bad thing? How do you attain what's good and avoid what's bad? By way of rules. So what rules guide your life so as to attain what matters and avoid what doesn't? What are some of the top rules for your life? And I'll throw out the 10 Commandments. If we are people of faith, likely the 10 Commandments mean something to us and guide our lives. What else? What is one rule that guides your life?
How about the golden rule?
Which has its various forms in virtually every faith tradition that we know of, stated either positively or negatively. Do unto others as you would have done unto you. Don't do unto others as you would have others not do to you. And then the what's been called the platinum rule, which is do unto others as they would have you do unto them. So various versions, but yeah, that seems pretty basic to probably all of us. Anything else? One other rule that guides your life?
How about seeking first to understand before being understood?
It's a good rule. Would help attain what matters relative to common understandings, harmonious relationships.
About truthfulness and honesty.
Seems like a good rule to me. Are there any exceptions to those rules? Well, to that one, we can think of an exception that's taught in every basic philosophy class, which is if you are hiding your Jewish neighbors from Nazi police and they come knocking at your door, ought you to say, yes, I'm hiding my Jewish neighbors, here they are, or ought you to say, no, I'm not, which would be untruthful, but perhaps justified on other grounds. And so rules too vary, and some are absolute and universal, like don't be cruel to other humans. I think that I can't think of any exception to that rule. And Jesus, of course, came up with the best answer to my question when teachers of the rules, the law, asked him, so which is the best? Which is the most important rule of all? And Jesus responds, how? He says, actually, there's two.
Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself.
Yeah. So two rules, and then he wraps it up saying, all of the rules and the prophets, all of the law and the prophets hangs on this. So pay attention to that one. What rules guide your life? Are your rules for life mine also? For many of them are, especially if we follow Jesus. If we're in that sort of faith community, are my rules for life yours also? Well, not all of them. I have some rules that guide my life that don't guide yours, and vice versa. So we share some rules, but not all. We don't all live by the same rules. We're not all the same. We don't all agree on what the rules are or should be. This is why ethics matters. Ethics is the discipline whereby we think about rules, and where rules enable us to attain what matters, or where rules get in the way of doing so, like Jim Crow laws, and require civil disobedience with the anticipation of consequences for doing so. And there appear to be on the horizon some rules that are being passed in legislatures today that some of us may be inclined to see as getting in the way of a good society rather than helping us to be better. And we may be inclined to try to change those rules, those laws, by voting, by advocacy, or perhaps by disobedience, anticipating consequences. But we don't all agree about that either. And we might well on this meeting not agree on which of those rules potentially are something we should disobey, or that we don't all agree. We need a process, a discipline whereby we think about dialogue, discern carefully what's going on in any particular context of questions of ought or ought not, and that discipline is ethics. So, having made those claims, I'm going to tell you a story, and if it's okay, I'm going to read this story. I don't always do so when I tell this story, but today I think I'd like to read it to you. It was 53, 54 years ago to the day since my mother birthed me. Now it was 51 years to the day since my mother birthed me that we both learned she was dying. Had to do the calculations there. I was in the medical school parking lot when Mom called. A noon ethics rounds awaited my facilitation, but I took her call, of course. It wouldn't just be birthday greetings. I knew she had a doctor's appointment that morning. What had been learned? Donna May went to see her rural Minnesota physician, I'll call him Dr. Johnson, after having undergone a battery of diagnostic tests a week earlier, including positive electron tomography imaging. She was not a complainer. Stoicism is a virtue for my people, but the immediate family was aware that Mom had not been feeling well for months and she was losing weight. She had nursed and endured chronic colitis throughout life, with regular colonoscopies in adulthood. The most recent, just months ago, had yielded no clues as to the source of her current gastrointestinal symptoms, hence the PET scan. What did the doctor tell you today, Mom? Anything new? There was an uncharacteristic silence, a long pause on her end of the phone, and then she responded in almost a whisper. Dr. Johnson said the scan lit up all over, in the liver and ovary, one lung, my stomach, and around the colon. She became silent. I uttered softly, "Oh, Mom." I knew that she knew. We both knew what this meant. "Oh, Mom." Donna May was 81 years old, though up to that time she looked and acted closer to 70. Old people descriptors, even those well-meant like active or spry, never seemed applicable. She had once been a one-room schoolhouse teacher and retained a perpetual inquisitiveness about life and learning. Much of that was channeled toward religious activities and literature after the last public school job. Sunday school replaced the one-room variety. Bible reading became her staple. After the funeral, someone discovered a shoebox of cassette tapes onto which Donna May surreptitiously had recorded her own reading of the entire New Testament, along with a message to family members, urging them to read or listen and learn. To our large extended family, including 5 adult children, 18 grandkids, and several great-grandchildren, Donna May was quintessentially mom or grandma, ever busy hosting, cooking, cleaning, sewing, quilting, teaching. And to all others in her Lake Wobegon-like community, the silver-haired dynamo was simply Donna May. From birthday to birthday, she had seemed nearly changeless, if not quite ageless. 14 weeks later, when she died, my mother was wizened, an emaciated centenarian. We learned then, as though that lesson was needed, the cruelty of terminal cancer. In this case, colorectal, primary metastatic stage 4, result cachexia wasting, terminus, death. And this in a high-tech era of medical miracles, decades into America's declared war on cancer. Indeed, 50 years earlier, just prior to the start of that pseudo conflict. And just after my birth, Donna Mae's mother had died an eerily similar death. My mother told me about her mother. At the end, she said to me, Grandma's legs were no bigger around than a hand clasp, just skin and bones. My own mother remembered this now with solemn dread and prognostic realization. Grandma, too, had been a casualty of cancer, although the C word never was uttered aloud back then. Still they knew, and now we knew, while still avoiding the term, what no one knew then or now was how to cure a terminal C of this sort so as to change the outcome for its multiple victims. Have we really learned so little in 50 years? Had nothing changed whatsoever in the care of persons with advanced stage cancer diagnoses? Donna Mae must have wondered, remembering family medical history and contemplating what lay ahead for her now. Had she asked, I could have noted the obvious. Certainly, there have been significant advances in oncology care. Survivorship of many cancers is at an all-time high, especially with early diagnosis and access to treatment. Expectation for cure, or at least remission, gives us all a measure of realistic hope, even if nearly all of us nowadays also calculate the likelihood of receiving a cancer diagnosis at some point before expiring, hopefully of something else. It's not that nothing had been learned, but that people still die. My mother could not change that outcome, neither could her doctors, nor sadly could ethicist I. What then could we do in the face of certain death from yet another generational round of C? Mom's mantra from the moment of diagnosis was this: I'm not afraid to die. I just don't want to hurt. Our mission then was to engage the powers of palliative medicine and hospice care so as to fulfill to the degree possible Donna Mae's dying wish. I say our mission was that, but my own participation was minimized by 600 miles distance. It was engaged, that mission was engaged primarily by Donna Mae herself at first, and then also by those family caregivers that she enlisted to the cause. It was mission, but sometimes more like battle. One no longer waged against the cancer itself. Not all members of the caregiver team were always in one accord as to what mattered, how things should be done, or with what aim in sight. The patient's own goals of care did not waver, however, and became explicit as the weeks wore on. We learned what mattered to Donna Mae and what did not, or not as much. Shortly after diagnosis, Dr. Johnson suggested surgery intended for relief of severe pain occurring from a major bowel obstruction. Removal and resection of the upper colon, along with significant tumor mass, would involve the risk of doing more harm than good, and it would be palliative only. I suppose it was hard to imagine anything more harmful than what was happening already. And of course, palliation coincided with Donna Mae's goals. So surgery was done and it was deemed successful. While signing consent forms for that operation, a hospital social worker also brought advanced directives information and forms to be filled out by the patient. There was no question as to whom she would appoint as agent for durable power of attorney, her DPOA. After 59 years of marriage to the same man, he undoubtedly would be named and was. The remaining question then was whether or not the DPOA would come around to share Donna Mae's goals of care as to what mattered to her and what did not. Her husband and DPOA actually was disinclined to believe the prognosis of death. He knew and recounted stories of others with cancer diagnoses and who were still alive years later. So-and-so had undergone treatment and had prayed or was prayed for and then got healed. God healed. Miracles happen. A miracle would happen. End of story. The healthcare directive form left by the social worker was a document that seemed premised on having a terminal condition, on dying. Donna Mae was not dying. She was living and surely would outlive him, her DPOA husband reasoned. No need to fill out that one. And she didn't. But one day, when her husband had left her bedside, a rare occurrence during several weeks of mom's hospitalization, daughter Bonnie was summoned to the room. I received a phone call shortly thereafter, which caught me yet again in a parking lot, actually the seminary parking lot, this time jump-starting my daughter's car. That could wait, however. The jump-starting could wait while opportunity came now to help jumpstart a process to support Donna Mae's aim of dying without inordinate hurt. Mom's voice was weaker now, but her mind was still clear. She wanted to talk about the things that had been on the healthcare directive form. She wouldn't fill it out and upset Dad, but she supposed the doctors would want to know what she wanted done in the weeks ahead. Decisions would need to be made. I suggested to Mom that she might dictate and Bonnie could jot it all down. But what should I say? She asked. I didn't tell Mom what to say, but I went down a short list of the medical options apt to be presented for decisions before this was all over. More surgery, chemotherapy, feeding tube, ventilator, resuscitation attempts, and hospice. Mom, some people might say they want doctors to try everything possible to keep them alive for as long as possible. Others might want to try some options, but not others, or only for a short time, maybe chemo, but no feeding tube or CPR. Or some people might say they only want to be kept comfortable. It's up to you, Mom. What do you want to say? What Donna Mae dictated, borrowing some language from the healthcare treatment directive form, was this: I'm not afraid to die, I just don't want to hurt. Do everything possible for pain and symptom management. I desire a DNR, do not resuscitate order. If doctors are quite sure that I will not get better, I do not wish to be kept alive by artificial or mechanical means. If a ventilator or feeding tube might be used short-term only for getting through an episode from which I have good possibility of getting better, it may be considered and tried. Do not continue if I won't get better. Listen to my husband and to my children where I am not sure what I want in a given situation. Do not prolong life where there is no quality of life and where it prolongs pain and suffering. I asked my sister to type it up that evening, then print out a copy for Mom to date and sign. Even if she wasn't willing to share these thoughts with Dad, her DPOA, the document, such as it was, might nonetheless be photocopied and given to Dr. Johnson and the medical oncologist for future reference. I opined that this should suffice and work as a declaration of her wishes. So Bonnie made copies and brought one along to Mom's next visit with her oncologist, who took one look and declared, this is no good. It's not a legal document. This won't work. That young physician was quite adamant as to what should happen next and what would work, as to what mattered or should matter to her patient also, and what did not. She said, I can give you some rounds of chemotherapy, and though it won't be curative, we can buy you some time. Time matters. How much? Maybe 6 months, maybe up to 2 years. Donna Mae responded, I don't want 6 months, not like this. I'm not afraid to die. I just don't want to hurt. The oncologist didn't come around much afterwards, did not share her patient's values as to what matters and didn't. Some physicians are not good learners, we learned. Dr. Johnson, the general surgeon, also received a copy of the dictated advanced directives. He was the doctor who had done the colonoscopy that showed nothing a few months before the scan that lit up all over. Now he read his terminal patient's directives such as they were and said, this will work, Donna Mae. We'll do our best to keep you comfortable. Clearly, not all physicians are alike. Some keep on learning, both from their patients and possibly from their own mistakes. I tell this story repeatedly to each new class of medical students and residents in ethics lectures, especially to those pertaining to advanced directives. I show them my sister's photo of Dr. Johnson seated by mom's bed in the living room out at the farm. A surgeon on a pro bono house call, just sitting and holding his dying patient's hand. I tell young doctors in the making about the ongoing controversy in bioethics over the efficacy or not of advanced directives, in particular, the form my mother bypassed yet dictated informally. Then I show them a slide of that scrap of paper typed and signed. Would it work? Could it be efficacious in a time of incapacity and surrogacy involving indecision or even conflict? What did not work so well in Donna Mae's case was the part of advanced directives that we bioethicists are most enamored with at late, the DPOA form. You cannot know in advance what you would want in any given situation, since there are so many variances that could make a difference between a ventilator or not, placing a peg tube, a feeding tube or not, attempting resuscitation or not. So we have said, just name your trusted agent and have a conversation about the rest. So we say. But in my mother's case, her DPOA assignment was understandable, but was it wise? Emotional attachment on the part of a spouse or close family member may actually get in the way of reasonableness. And it did. In the last 24 hours of life, when Donna Mae had settled into unconsciousness and a period of agonal breathing, there was an impassioned plea by her DPOA to return to the hospital. It seemed to him that hospice was the culprit, not cancer, that the patient was being starved to death. Why don't they do something to try to get her well? They just dope her up with all those drugs. She needs to eat and to get treatment so she can get better. They're just letting her die. He went to the telephone to call an ambulance. But Donna Mae's scrappy healthcare directive stopped her DPOA from doing the wrong thing despite good intent. The daughter who had taken dictation pulled out the paper and read aloud to Dad, imploring him to listen. I am not afraid to die. I just don't want to hurt. My sister read all of the directives and then stated firmly, you're not going to call for an ambulance and she's not going back to the hospital. It's not what Mom wanted. And Dad listened. All of us can learn, whether young or old, even under the worst of conditions. Overall, what I have learned from my mother's cancer dying is not quite so idyllic as to how to die well. To be honest, her dying was hard and quite possibly horrid. In the midst of it all, she could journal admirable stoicisms like, it's not what we wanted, but there are many good things happening too. Instead of asking always, why me? Mom wrote, why not me? I've had a good journey. And at journey's end, sometime prior to terminal sedation, Donna Mae stated tearfully, everyone is being so kind. I'm just so thankful. Most everyone caring for her was kind. She was attended by a hospice nurse who could have gone by the name Angel. Dr. Johnson drove 25 miles out to the farm to make that house call. For 30 minutes, he sat holding Mom's hand, very kind. Daughter Bonnie came from Arkansas to stay at the farm and tend to our parents full time for those last 3 months of life, with 2 other daughters and our younger brother also there frequently. So very kind. Despite the last minute drama of a DPOA's panicked plea to call an ambulance and resume what would have been futile treatments, Donna Mae ultimately died at home on the farm, with hospice care. She lay in a comfortable Medicare supplied bed set up for this occasion in a sunny living room, Mom's favorite. A living room became her dying room. In the hours before her last breath, I sat with Mom and strummed favorite hymns on an old beloved auto harp she had once played. My 4 siblings were present along with Dad. We sang together Donna Mae's favorite hymn of all as she slipped away to her heavenly home where she had longed to go in recent weeks. Precious Lord, take my hand, lead me home. At the last refrain, Mom was released for departure. We held hands, prayed, wept, and sang her out, as my people say. I am clergy of Christian faith, and I had brought anointing oil, given to me by a seminarian years earlier. With my thumb, I traced a cross upon a cold forehead, praying for the ultimate healing. In the end, everything transpired according to hospice plan. One might say then that Donna Mae died well, and those witnessing it had opportunity to learn to do so as well. I would say that my mother died better rather than worse. I don't know that it was a particularly good death, but Donna Mae died better or less worse with less hurt than she might have in the midst of the bad befalling her, the sea that felled her in the end. Perhaps learning to die better would be sufficiently good. I hope to heed that lesson and to pass it on with gratitude to this one who had been a teacher, both mortal mother and mortality mentor. When others had left to call a mortician and complete paperwork with hospice, I closed the lids of her eyes. It was the first time to perform such a final and fitting act. Some things are neither known nor learned, just done. So, not everyone shared Donna Mae's values, wanted to live by her rules. And so the pillars of medical ethics came into play. What we teach every medical student nowadays, every nursing student, as students in allied health, we teach, if nothing else, the ethics lesson they get during their training is to respect persons and their autonomy, to do what's good for patients. We call that beneficence. To do no harm, we call that non-maleficence, which no one ever learns to spell. We teach to distribute resources equitably, justice, distributive justice. We say if you learn nothing else about ethics during your training to help patients, learn about autonomy, respect for autonomy, beneficence, non-maleficence, and justice. In Donna Mae's case, all of these came into play. Respecting her autonomous wish relative to what mattered and didn't matter, or not as much. I'm not afraid to die, I just don't want to hurt. Beneficence, do what will benefit her and don't do what is futile, what will harm or not benefit relative to what matters to her. And justice, equitable distribution of resources. Medicare mattered and helped her to attain what not everyone, unfortunately, inequitably was able to attain. And so we still need to work on justice. From my mother's story and hundreds, thousands of other stories in healthcare especially, but for congregants and within my extended family and neighbors, I have learned that ethics matters, that medical ethics matters. I think it matters also to you. Does it? I expect you all have some stories to share as well. And we do have some time remaining for stories, for questions, for comments, for argument. How do you respond?
So, Dr. Rosell, I appreciate you sharing such a personal story. So thank you very much, sir. I guess I would want to leverage your experience directly and say and ask maybe, and if this makes any sense, where is the slippery slope, or is there a slippery slope between the situation with your mother and her desires and what matters to her or mattered to her, and someone that just literally wants to take their life? And in some states, I guess that remains legal, I believe, for them to take overt actions to end their lives. And is that clear enough, or am I muddier?
What you're talking about, Craig, is euthanasia. In the broadest sense of the word, in the sense of the word that that the Catholic moralists have utilized it for decades. They've talked about euthanasia, which is a beautiful death, good death. That's what it literally means, euthanasia. Of course, it has become a term associated with only one end of a spectrum of types of euthanasia, of good or considered good deaths, with the end of the spectrum that has been mostly impermissible, which is involuntary. Patient didn't volunteer for this. Active, somebody else doing something to end someone's life, on the sense that it will be a better option than allowing them to go on living. Mercy killing. And that has been mostly impermissible, although sometimes done in most societies. On the other end of the spectrum is my mother. Voluntary, inactive. Euthanasia, if you want to use that word. And most people don't. But voluntary, it's her decision. And it's her saying, don't do things to me that I don't want, that don't matter to me, or that would be attempting to gain 6 months or 2 months of additional life that is not of value to me. Not like this. Not if I cannot be cured. And so she's on the other end. In the middle is involuntary, passive, where you have a patient who no longer has capacity to say, don't do this. And so surrogate decision makers and physicians together engage in a collaborative shared decision-making process, trying to either ascertain what would this patient tell us if she could. What mattered to her in life? Those of you who knew her, her spouse, her children, her friends, her pastor. What do you think Donna Mae would say if she could tell us, if she hasn't already? And she can't anymore. And she never will be able to. So we use substituted judgment. If we have nobody who knows, hasn't a clue what Donna Mae would say in this situation, then it's another standard of decisions, surrogate decision making, which is called the best interest standard. What would a reasonable person want? A golden rule. Would we want it? And that's not as, we're not as likely to be accurate as with substituted judgment, much less with advanced directives, patient already having told us what she would want. So we don't like to go to the best interest standard, but it's utilized, and I get consulted multiple times every week for those sort of decisional process. So that would be one step over from the ideal, which is a voluntary patient telling us what she wants, and passive, not asking you to kill me or to prescribe a lethal dose of something. I just don't want you to do things that would perpetuate the dying process and possibly cause suffering and hurt towards no good end. So you move over involuntary, a patient can't tell us, still passive. You move over one other step on that spectrum, and it would be voluntary but active. You have a patient who says, with capacity, do something to stop this. This was King Saul. King Saul is mortally wounded, but he's not dead. And the enemy is coming, and he asks two different people, two variations on the story, and the First Kings, the last chapter, First Kings, and the first chapter of Second Kings, or is it First Samuel, Second Samuel? It's one of those two. Last chapter one, first chapter the other. Two versions of the story, but in both cases, King Saul is terminally injured. He's going to die, but not soon enough. And he sees the enemy coming. He knows they're going to make sport of him, humiliate him, probably torture him, take him through the streets. And that's worse than anything. So he asks his sword bearer, just kill me, run my sword through me, and put me out of this misery. Sword bearer says no. Then he asks the Amalekite soldier, who's not an enemy soldier. He's an Amalekite, but he's not an enemy. He's an immigrant soldier. And he asks the Amalekite soldier to do the same thing, and the Amalekite soldier does, in that version of the story, does a mercy killing. Voluntary, Saul is asking for it, but active. He runs his spear through him and kills him. Again, over on the other end of the spectrum is involuntary. You have a person who is not asking to be killed. Active, someone does it to them on grounds that it would be better for that person to be dead than alive. Mostly impermissible. Over on the other, the next one over, it is permissible in some states. Oregon, Washington, Vermont, Montana by court action, Washington, D.C., all of Canada, parts of Europe, permissible. Patient asks and is given a prescription with instructions as to how to do it. In most of those jurisdictions in the US, no one can do it for them. So it is a sort of suicide. The patient has to take the medication. There's criteria for who can ask for this, whether it will be granted or not, and then how it's done. But it is over on that end of the spectrum. My mother is way over on the other end. That's the answer, Craig, is ethics. We've done the thinking process to make distinctions between my mother's situation and the Nazi Holocaust, where some demented persons, immoral, evil persons decided on behalf of other persons that they would be better off dead than alive. There's a huge difference. There's a spectrum. And why do we know that? Because we stop to think. And in every given context where something of this sort arises, we need to stop and think. Not just feel, but move it from the gut to our head and think. Ethics is a rational process. And then we attempt to do better rather than worse. and in the hospital setting, a healthcare setting, ambulatory settings as well, clinics, etc. That's why people call me. Not just from the University of Kansas health system, but other health systems in this area and some from other parts of the country. Healthcare providers call and ask, help me think about this, because I don't quite know how to think about this. We want to do the right thing. They share your value, Craig. They want to do what is right. Good conduct. They want to be good doctors and nurses and healthcare providers, and not bad. And so when they can't figure it out, they have resources like the Center for Practical Bioethics at hospitals like the one where I head up the Ethics Consult Service. They have a dozen of us who, in most cases, they volunteer on top of what else they do. Physician, nurse, administrator, speech language, social work. They volunteer because they think ethics matters and because they like to help people with hard decisions. Any other comments, questions? That was a long answer. Sorry.
I wanted to share, a number of you on here know me, but a little over 9 years ago, my husband died, and it was similar to what Terry read about his mother. Only he lived only 2 weeks after he found out he had leukemia. And since a lot of you, I think, are pastors or in that role, I just want to say it's okay to question doctors. When his oncologist came in and said, this is what we found, this is the treatment we'll start tomorrow morning. My husband was a hospice chaplain, I will say, for 22 years. And I'd been a pastor for 20. And I kept asking questions. I didn't say the words, is he gonna die? But I asked questions to try to help me figure it out. And he wouldn't give any direct answers. As soon as he left, David just looked at me and said, I've got to go to the hospice ward. But I can get through this. And I said, yeah, I know. And he died the next day. Well, we went to the hospice floor the next morning and he died the next morning. But talking to my daughter-in-law afterwards, she's a physician, and she had looked up the diagnosis, and there's absolutely no treatments that are recommended for it. And yet this doctor, it would have been experimental, which if the doctor had said, there's nothing that we know of that helps, would you be willing to be part of an experiment? He might have said yes, because education was very important to him. But he did have a pain-free, for the most part, 90% of the time, pain-free dying. It was a good death. And just real quick, he had asked that the Hallelujah chorus be played on a loop as he was dying. So my son got that started. So there was singing when he died too, Terry.
I'm sure there was.
So anyway, ask another doctor if you want to.
Yeah.
Because if he hadn't had that much experience in hospice, I hadn't been a pastor, we would have just done it. I have no doubt. And I was really angry at that doctor. I will, at this point, probably never say anything to him. But I just want to say, don't be afraid to question, because find out if there is hope. Because quality of life was my answer to your first question about values. So make sure there's hope for quality of life. He wouldn't have had any.
Thank you for sharing that, Cheryl. And yeah, you know, physicians and others who are in healthcare are mostly really, really good people. In that doctor's case, I'm guessing that what mattered to him in that moment was offering something, because so many of his patients or their patients just want something, or because it's just so hard to give bad news and to have nothing to offer. What my mother experienced, what our family experienced from Dr. Johnson, did I call him, was a general surgeon, one who had missed the colonoscopy read that might have offered early treatment options. Nonetheless, was able to move from his own values, what mattered to him, and live into what mattered to his patient, who was dying. And he could do nothing except he could. And this is what I tell medical students and resident physicians in training. I said, I show them that photo. I have thousands of people. My mother gave me permission to tell her story, if it would help somebody. I said, yeah, Mom, it might. I show them that photo and I say, if you feel like there's nothing you can do, remember, you can go and hold your dying patient's hand, if for 30 minutes or 3 minutes, and just be there. That mattered more to my mother than anything else that surgeon could offer at that point in her dying. And it mattered so much to us, that I sent that doctor a thank you note. I should send a lot more, but that was the one I did. Thank you for just coming and sitting and holding Mom's hand while she was dying. Sometime I need to get a hold of him. He's retired, and I never actually met the man, but I need to get a hold of him and tell him how that act of compassion and empathy, of living out of my mother's values instead of his own, how much that has made a difference, quite possibly in the lives of thousands of young doctors and millions of their patients. Ethics matters, doing the right thing matters, thinking before acting matters. Not everyone can do so in every given situation. And I'm sorry that happened for David and for you, Cheryl, but we do the best we can in the moment. Any other final comments? We're over time. So Jessica, it's up to you.
I wanted to kind of finish that since you're talking about doctors. The next morning, a doctor came in before he moved and we told him what we were doing. And he said, I'm so glad you made that decision. And his comment was very helpful. I mean, I know doctors have their hearts in the right places, but yeah, we had very good experiences for the most part.
And I'll tell you too, if you end up going to that hospital again, one of my former students, medical student, as well as a bioethics student, years ago, she landed at that hospital to head up palliative care. And now she's the chief medical officer. And I can bet that she is passing on the values that other physician expressed and shared and was able to exhibit, because my former student is just one of those docs who is wonderful and is ethically minded, who thinks as well as has compassion. So that hospital's in good hands, good leadership hands. Anything else, Jessica?
Well, thank you so much. Thank you to everyone who's here, to everyone who shared your insights and your stories in the chat and on this recording, and to you, Dr. Rosell, for the story about Donna May and for your wisdom and experience as a bioethicist. Thanks for everyone for attending here today. Just wanted to let you know that our next Third Thursday Lunch and Learn will be on June 16th at noon on Zoom. with the topic of adaptive change in challenging times, the Reshaping Church experience. So this will be the leadership team of the Reshaping Church program here at Central, talking not just about the experiences of churches that have gone through the Reshaping Church process, but also what it's been like as a leadership team to reshape our own process as we adapt to changing situations during COVID and on. So invite you all for that. Again, every third Thursday at noon, we host these lunch and learns. Thank you all again for attending. Please be safe and be well, and hope to see you again soon.
Thank you.